especially in light of what Florida State football was for decades under Bobby Bowden, meaning stable and elite. It's tough to get a handle on what this program really is at this point. Post Jimbo Fisher, and say what you will about Jimbo, and he certainly left the program not in the best of shape. There were some cracks there. They were only 1 year removed from a New Year's Six bowl appearance and win in the Orange Bowl in 2016 and 2017, despite a down record, showed on the field that they could still compete against the best teams in the ACC, i.e. Clemson. Post Jimbo Fisher, it's been a mess, except for one elite season, 10-3, of course, in 2022, leading into 13-1 and what should have been a playoff appearance in 2024. But besides that, the Willie Taggart era was a disaster, followed by Mike Norvell, up and down and up and down and up and down. To Norvell's defense, he took over a bad football program and he used the transfer portal to the best of his abilities, and it has worked in spades at times. However, what's been left is a program that does no longer recruit at a high level, not in the state of Florida, not period. No Mike Norvell recruit has reached the NFL during his tenure at Florida State that started in 2020. Now let's look ahead to 2025 and see if Florida State's transfer portal additions for this fall will turn out. The offense was beyond atrocious. Of course, a historic collapse overall, going from 13-1 to 2-10. I challenge you to find a greater collapse in the history of college football. I don't know of one. 13-1 to 2-10. And the offense was the main culprit. And so bring in a new chief of the offense, offensive coordinator Gus Malzahn, the latest of the head coaching casualties during the NIL era, who says, I've had enough. I can make a lot of money as an offensive coordinator, working with players, scheming plays, calling plays, and not dealing with the rest of this mess that is college football. So it's Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell, and if these two guys can't fix the offense, then Florida State is in real problems and headed toward a new era post Mike Norvell. They went out and got a quarterback after the failed experiment of DJ Uiagalelei, although that should not have been an experiment. It was basically who he is. Now they pick up a guy that's more in the form of Jordan Travis, a poor man's Jordan Travis, and Thomas Castellanos at Boston College last season. 61% completion percentage, 18 touchdowns, 5 picks. He also busted loose for 1,100 plus yards rushing and 13 touchdowns. And this in the wake of Florida State quarterback play led by DJU in 2024 at just 50% completion percentage, 11 touchdowns, and 13 picks. Those would have been horrendous numbers in 1975, let alone 2024. The running backs last year were, Florida State legends are turning in their graves or on social media, depending on their current life status. Roydell Williams is back. He had a subpar season last year. Gavin Sawchuk is the incoming transfer from Oklahoma. Turn the clock back to 2023. He was rushing for 744 yards and 9 touchdowns for the Sooners. And you also have explosive Jalen Lucas, a threat to a certain extent, although he's got to stay healthy and has never proven to be commonly used weapon, more of a gadget type player. At wide receiver, FSU should be substantially better. They picked up 2 productive players, especially Squirrel White from Tennessee, who caught 131 passes for the Vols. Deuce Robinson is a guy that I love as a matchup, a nightmare with the size-speed combination that he presents. 23 catches, 5 touchdowns for USC last season. The offensive line brings in 4 transfer portal players. That position was a mess last season as well. Now on to the Florida State defense. Not nearly the disaster that the offense was last season. However, it's kind of difficult to judge because they got into these slow, grinded out type of games in which the opposing team knew that they could hold down the Florida State offense and play that kind of game. Darrell Jackson made a decision bypassing the NFL, coming back, the former Miami transfer, 4 tackles for loss and 3.5 sacks. He's a premier run stuffer. James Williams of Nebraska and Stephen Thompson, the linebacker, are two guys who should know defensive coordinator Tony White's scheme because, of course, they're coming in from Nebraska as well. And Tony White did wonders with the Huskers on that side of the ball. So capable coordinators. Florida State, if it starts with coaching, and it does in college football, Mike Norvell's a really good CEO for the most part. Once you give him the players and the roster via the transfer portal, he knows what to do with it. And then you look at the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator spots, and those have been significantly upgraded with Malzahn and, yes, Tony White and the Williams kid out of Nebraska. 7 sacks in 16 games is pretty decent productivity. The linebacking core may be the best unit on the field, both sides of the ball included. Elisha Herring comes in from Memphis, where he totaled 80 tackles last year. He had 60 the previous season at Tennessee. Omar Graham, 37 tackles, 4 tackles for loss. Justin Cryer, 32 stops. And Blake Nicholson with 52 tackles and 4 tackles for loss are the holdovers for Florida State at linebacker. The cornerbacks have great potential. These guys are athletic and they are skilled. However, they have yet to prove it on a long-term scale over the course of the entire season. But Charles Lester, Quindarius Jones, and Jabril Rawls give Florida State some hope at the corner position. At safety, Florida State was down last year. They do have Shaheem Brown coming back, who led the team with 70 tackles. However, the safety position was generally not addressed in the portal or in recruiting. It's quite ironic that for a 2-10 football team that Florida State boasted the All-American place kicker in Ryan Fitzgerald and the All-American punter in Alex Mastromano. It is difficult to get that kind of combination anywhere, especially for a team that finished at 2-10, and then to get that kind of recognition to be named All-American. Unfortunately, both of those players are gone. Now on to the schedule for Florida State. Let's look it over. Bama out of the gate at home. That's probably not a win. Is it a winnable game? Yes. This is not vintage Bama coming in with Kalen DeBoer, and they have much to prove, and they will have a new starting quarterback and an inexperienced starting quarterback. Of course, Thomas Castellanos brought Boston College into Tallahassee last year in September and won that game 28-13. Bama last met Florida State in 2017 in the opener in Atlanta, won that game 24-7. At Virginia for the ACC opener. And then outside of Miami and Clemson, these are mostly 50-50 toss-up games, where if Florida State's as bad as they were last year, they're going to lose these games by a score. Otherwise, they should have a talent advantage on most of these teams, and they really have no difficult, daunting stretches to get through. There is no SMU. There is no Louisville. Most likely the second and third best teams are the third and fourth best teams in the ACC. Florida State, of course, concludes the season with their arch rival at Florida, a 31-11 win for the Gators in 2024, and Florida looks like a substantially better team entering this season, although they flipped roles going into 2024, where Florida State was a preseason top 10 team, and Florida and Billy Napier largely dismissed. So a lot can change. But as we survey the schedule, I see 2 out-of-conference losses almost certainly, and then 5 total. 5-3 in the ACC, bring it to 7-5 overall. That's a huge upgrade, obviously, after 2-10. But Mike Norvell, now entering a 6th year, would be going into a 7th year, coming off 7-5. Certainly not what Florida State football is all about. Leave those comments and questions down in the comments section down below. Please like and subscribe, and keep in mind, you can give me a call or just join the chat and Trash Talk College Football Monday through Friday for the College Football Show at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.